Hello, and welcome to the Learning Design Mastermind podcast, a podcast that bridges the worlds of instructional design and many topics in our field. I am Daisy Barreto, your host, and today I'm very excited to guide you as we explore these exciting topics. And as you know, in each episode, we will explore the latest trends, case studies, and practical tips from professionals in our field that can help you with delivering learning experience for your learners, your students, or trainees. So here with us today is the one and only Sheri Conklin, who is not only an MIT alumnus, but also my colleague at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. And Sherry, could you please tell us more about your position, where you currently work, and what you do?
I am a faculty member in the Masters of Instructional Technology program and have been for about 6 years. Prior to that, I was the director of distance education and e-learning for approximately 2 years. And before that, I was an instructional designer in distance education and e-learning for about 11 years. And we go back even further. I was the special ed department chair at Ashley High School.
Thank you. That's very exciting to know all the great things that you have done and then how your career just like progressed until where you are right now. And because of your experience in many things that you have done, one of the things that we are hearing a lot, on not only employers but also job announcements is this notion of um, the positions where they're seeking is employees that future employees or prospective employees that have these interpersonal skills. So with that said, what interpersonal skills do you believe are most critical for instructional designers working in collaborative environments?
Yes, and I think it's a really hard concept for people to get, just by taking classes, which is why I think it's really important that the program has group work because you have people who are collaborating, typically in a stressful environment because they typically work full time and have families. Um, so I think it's very important to have active listening skills and being able to build rapport with people that you may not particularly hang out with on a regular basis. Meaning if you were to go outside the workplace, you may want to hang out with a person because you really like them and you have shared values. But in the workplace, you may not have shared values, but you still have to work with them. So it's important to build rapport because if you have a good rapport with somebody, then you're able to collaborate a little bit easier with them. And I think also having some leadership skills, such as a facilitation, trying to get concepts across to people who may not understand instructional design concepts, such as subject matter experts, but also have conflict resolution and being able to, let's say, if you're the project lead, to be able to assist if there's a difference of opinions between team members.
Thank you. And then my follow-up question on that would be like, can you provide maybe an example from your own experiences, right? Like, especially as being the director of the distance learning program, what were, and then it can be on any level that you saw, that these skills were very important, for, because I mean, I'm thinking about like, the practicality, like, as a student, like if I was a student, um, maybe what would I may encounter as an instructional designer that I should be in tune in a situation to be prepared to, okay, these are the skill set that I wanted to cultivate, especially on that interpersonal skills um, area.
So I think, building rapport is a big umbrella that will help with um, facilitating the information, collaborating outside of silos. So typically we're in departments. And so when I was the director of e-learning, things that we would do or we would be in charge of would infiltrate into other sectors. So we were under academic affairs. But maybe something that we did would affect people over in business affairs. And because I had good rapport with people in those divisions, I knew what their job was. Like I understood where they were coming from. It's much like having doing a learner analysis in the sense of you understand the cause and effect of actions. And so, um, for example, I used to work with somebody in the technology division, and I was over in the academic division, and they would get upset because faculty wouldn't look on the website and know that there might be downtimes or how to submit a ticket. And I would say, but don't forget, faculty are not just teaching classes, they're also doing research. They also have service. They have service to the university, their profession, their college, and their department. So they're stretched and a bit scattered because they've got three big silos, all of which are very different. Your one main job is very focused. And so I would try to give that person a persona. And the same was with the Disability Resource Center. When all this accessibility really started coming down the pipeline, there was already a rapport built with that director to where, you know, we would do stand-up walks or walking meetings where, how are things going? This is some things that are coming down the pipeline. I want you to know, we do have to have a really quick turnaround time. And because we had the rapport, we were able to move things through a lot more quickly. And there was a mutual respect of the workplace respect. And although I wouldn't have hung out with that person outside of work, just because, I'm a Steeler fan and maybe that person wasn't, um, that, you know, we had a mutual respect for how we handled um, our workplace ethics.
Thank you, Sherry. And it's good to hear a little bit more of like, practical strategies, or practical tips that we could be implementing, especially on how to think and build those skill sets. And even for people that are looking for job and careers, like, what they should be envisioning doing and building as a strategy. And with that, one other area that it's very important, especially on that umbrella of interpersonal skills, is the communication skills, right? Like, and I think like you mentioned that, like, how we are that building rapport is not just the building rapport, but it really talks about like how we're communicating with one another, right? Like how we are understanding, right? And I heard you saying too, like listening, right? Because communication not just one way street, it's like that two way. So could you share a time where you thought that I mean, an example, in your former or current career where communication skills potentially help resolve a challenge during, let's say, an instruction design project, a course development, whatever was the project that you were working or that you want to just provide as a case.
I think, partly is your approach. And one of our other alumni had mentioned whenever she is working with someone new, she goes and looks them up. Where are they on the org chart? Um, does a little digging. What's their preferred method of communication? Do they prefer in person? Do they prefer online? That way, that whole approach to when you even start isn't dictated by you, the instructional designer, let's say, but you're saying, I'm here to help you get this project done. So let's meet on your terms, on your ground. Let's meet in Zoom or let's meet face to face. Um, and I'll remember one faculty who was always very abrasive, let's say. And whenever I was in the building, I would stop by and just ask that person how their hobby was going. Just little things. And the wall started to crumble slowly. And so when I did have to work with a project on her with this person, it was a lot easier because we'd already broken down that barrier just by having casual communication of how are you, what's happening. But I think, some people don't have that time. And they may not want to do that. So then I also think, let's say, when I was a director, it wasn't personal. Um, I hate to say it's business, but if you take a project and take the personal out of it, people get very personal about their work and get really upset when they receive constructive feedback or just feedback that may not be constructive. And so, you know, stating here's the goal, here's our timeline to do it. Let's do the best to collaborate. There will be a feedback loop, so getting all of that messaging up front, there will be a feedback loop. Um, this is the expectation for, all of the coursework coming out. I always tell people go ahead and schedule meetings. So when I was working as like an instructional designer, assisting faculty with their course development, I would schedule the meetings for the entire semester. So then it was already on their calendar. Because once everything gets going, it's hard to get things in there. And then communicating in multiple formats and getting comfortable with communicating in multiple formats.
Those are so many great strategies. And then just hearing you say it remind me of a time too, as when I was instructional designer, and it was also working with a faculty member. And then as you said, like, we shouldn't take things personal. And I think like that's where it really struck me, is because it was me and another instructional designer. I was already more acquainted of like how faculty, and especially faculty that does not know instructional designer or the instructional design process, how they understand that. And so even though it may, her response, her reaction sound like, abrasive, it was just like, the nature because they don't understand. And then my colleague, she was just frustrated. She was like, oh, but we need to get this done in this way. And I kind of like had to pretty much talk to her and say, well, we need to help them help us, right? Like, I cannot just go and here the list of questions that I need from you so then we can do our job. It's like, if they don't know why that information is important, it's like that whole thing, like we need to educate them and then help them help us. And if we don't do that job, then we're not going to get what we need from them. And then, they're going to be probably even more closed doors than they were from the beginning. And I really appreciate you talking about like those strategies of how can we start slowly breaking that wall that is there. Because the moment that we have that trust, then things will come up easier, easily, I should say. And that is gonna go now, like, just talking about this is gonna go to my next question to you, which I think like feedback is something that I see a lot of people having a problem because everybody just want positive feedback. And not always that's the case, especially when you are on the field. You might have negative feedback, and then how do you respond? And how you deal with that can be different. So my question to you is like, what strategies do you use or you would recommend people to take into consideration when they are navigating feedback, both giving and receiving it in design partnerships?
Yeah, and I'm going to go back when you said to that trust, and I've heard this more than once. I may not like that person, but I always know where I stand. And so I think having people trust you, even though ideally you're not abrasive, um, but having the integrity and moral ethics of being upfront and honest and not, lying about, oh, but this is so good, and then walking away going, that's awful, you know. So, and if you go into feedback, and I know you use the RISE framework, and I use the Quality Matters Helpful Feedback framework, where to give feedback, you're sensitive, um, noting that the person is a colleague. So do it in conversational tone, highlight something that is positive and then move into potentially what needs to be changed and then give a suggestion. So instead of saying, and it's that old phrase, if you're going to bring up a problem, then come with a solution as well. Constructive feedback should be not only pointing out what the problem is, but then offering, you know, if you could, you know, maybe take out the busy background or do a gradient background that's, not stripes. I mean, just throwing things out there. Um, but you may not get that kind of feedback. So then you also have to realize who you're getting feedback from. So if it's like a director, they are probably extremely busy. So they're only going to probably highlight, you got a typo here. I can't understand it there. That's muffled, or, that's not exactly what I was looking for. And so you may take follow-up questions. Well, what is it that you're looking for? So, being able to ask those good questions. And then again, don't take it personal because you are creating products, um, not with your own vision, but with somebody else's vision who's unable to create them. So it may take a couple of times.
Well, those are great, great advice, that you're sharing here. And I think like now my next question is going to be to something that you said earlier, which I think it also ties to feedback, to a certain extent, because um, in order to give, and even receive feedback, I think you also need to have a little bit of that listening skills, right? Like you really need to be attuned to, which is going to be my question to you, is like, what role does active listening play in understanding the needs of instructor and learners, and in the instructional design process, the larger and complex instructional design process. So what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think active listening is so important because you have to read between the lines. Again, we always say a lot of times our subject matter experts um, are potentially in different departments, divisions, so you're pulling them away from their everyday work to potentially create a project for someone who's not in their division and not their direct report. So they may be quick to give you information. So, respecting their time, but also trying to pull out the information instead of scheduling hour-long meetings for things. If you think you can get it in 30 minutes or 45, then do a 45-minute meeting because someone may say, oh, okay, I can do that. That's 45 minutes. But I think it's really important to listen and hear what they're saying because again, it's not your product that you're actually creating. Typically, you're creating it for another entity and getting information from other divisions and people. So, um, listening is very important. But then, um, at this, and I think we've talked about this in other areas of restating what you've heard, which is really important. So, what and don't restate it exactly as they stated it, restate it as your understanding, and then maybe move forward with it and say, so what you're saying is, what I'm hearing you say is um, X, Y, and Z. So if other people who don't know about this and need to learn about it, would they need to know A, B, and C, or would they need to know M, N, O, and P as well? And that might make them think and be like, oh yeah, they can't just move right into it. So that restating is very important.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because I do think like the restatement is so important because we can always interpret things differently. And if we don't state what we think that we heard, that's where a lot of misunderstanding can happen and occur in this whole process. And it's better to check early on in the instruction design process than towards the end, because if you're just towards the end and you realize, oh no, this is not what I meant, then that's a problem. So we definitely should not just listen and take everything straight value if we don't have, this is what I heard you say. Is that, accurate? It's so good. So I have two, I mean, our time is kind of like, getting up, and I'm gonna I'm gonna actually throw you two questions, at once, because I do think like one is important, whatever you think. And then the this last one kind of like wrap us up. So what advice would you give you to new instruction designers about developing their interpersonal skills in the first workplace, but also in addition to, especially for those people that are kind of like introvert, or that they feel that they don't have that skill set, you know what I mean? Because I do see a lot of people like struggling with that, that they think like, I'm not a people's person. I don't know how to do that well. What should I do?
One of the things that I hear at the end of internships so often is, I wish I communicated more with my client. And I often tell people, go ahead and set up like bi-weekly check-in meetings. But I think the thing is a new instructional designer, you don't want to bother people. And that's your job, is to gather the information. So I think as a new instructional designer, realizing that communication is part of your job and is integrated into everything that you do, um, that would be first and foremost. And then being extremely, be organized, be methodical about how you communicate. And so if you feel like um, you need to meet bi-weekly, if you're new and say, well, I'd like to have these check-in meetings, most likely they won't take the full 30 minutes. It may only take 10, and you'll have your time, but you'll get your product on time and exactly what you want. So it's also explaining that I know I'm taking up some of your time, but then you're going to get what you want in that timely manner, and maybe even, deliver it before, which never hurts. That's all I've got.
No, that's really good. And I think like, one of the things that just hearing you say that I think it's that organization piece, right? Especially if you set it up by weekly meetings or weekly meetings, whatever it is that is a core, I mean, is an agreement between you and your client, or you and the person that you're working on a project. It's being prepared for what this meeting is going to call for, right? And then having, even if it is not a full-blown agenda, right, but at least like, what are our touch points here? What do I need from you at this point? If it is because I think like there's this false assumption that I need to ask all your question at the beginning, and then that's it, and I'm done, and I'm gonna go and work on the project, and bye bye, and I just talk to you again towards the end of it. But that's not true for any project. You need to always check in because, and I say this from my own experience, that what it was envisioned in the beginning is going to change in a month from just like, what people are talking and the way that the direction of the project is taking. It's like that shaping, right? It's like, I mean, I'm gonna do this analogy here, but it might, sound a little weird, but it's like a baby, right? Like a baby, like, from when it is, start being formed is different than what it's gonna be like, the last outcome is shaping slowly but surely throughout the whole process. But you cannot just like, always gonna be like this, because the end product, it takes that process and then a lot of inputs, to be what it is at the end.
Yeah, and I teach at project management for instructional designers. And although we go over different project management concepts, I tried to say throughout the entire course that all of project management is communication. So when you have your initial meeting, it's defining the boundaries of, because like you said, things change and they'll come back and say, actually, could we add one more lesson on, AI ethics to this course along with whatever your this training video? And then you have to look at them and say, yes, we can. But now our timeline's going to change because I'm adding more. And so that having those check-ins, and I think that's why a lot of corporations have moved to just the agile format of stand-ups where people have to stand up every week and just say where they're at in their projects and how long they think their next steps are going to go. So it keeps everybody on task. It keeps everything transparent. And I think transparency is the one of the important key factors in communicating with, multiple team members.
Thank you, Sherry. And unfortunately, we're a little over our time. But thank you so much for just, taking the time and then talking to us about interpersonal skills. This is such a great um, topic to talk and then share with, current and former students, wherever you are. And thank you so much for just taking your time to share this with us. And I hope everybody that is listening or watching us can take those skill set and put into practice. So thank you.
Thank you.